And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Bookish Moment. I am Sarah Burr.
And I am JC Kenny, and it is super exciting to welcome a brand new author to us. We hope you have a great time here, folks. Sarah, who are we chatting with today? Who are we getting bookish with?
We are joined by the wonderful Jodé Millman. Jodé, thank you so much for being
Woo!
here today. You're celebrating the release of your latest novel, The Empty Kayak, and it's hot off the presses. Yesterday was release day. So we're
Yes.
really excited to have you here with us this afternoon. And hopefully you can just take a moment to introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. Well, first of all, Sarah and JC, thanks for having me here at a Bookish Moment. My name is Jodé Millman. I'm an author and I'm also an attorney. I live in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I write crime fiction, obviously. My fiction is inspired by actual true crimes that have happened here in the Hudson Valley. So so
Okay.
being an attorney and having the inside and that kind of system, I'm really enjoying writing. This is my third novel. The Empty Kayak is the third in the Queen City Crime series. And it was released, as Sarah just mentioned, it was released yesterday. I got the box and everything. It was super exciting.
Well, that is so cool. Congratulations first off, on
Thank
your book
you.
baby. Since you said this is the third book in this series, if you don't mind, we want to spend most of the time talking about The Empty Kayak, but could you maybe take us back in time a little bit to kind of set the scene about this series, and so give us an idea of like where it's located, who some of the big players are, and then we'll get into The Empty Kayak.
Sure. Well, the story starts, actually it's chronological. But you can read any of these books standalone. I'd like to stress that. But the story involves, it's really the story arc of a gal named Jessie Martin. And when she starts out, she's a pregnant attorney and she gets a call in the middle of the night from her mentor saying, I think I've killed someone. And Jessie, being a corporate attorney, she really doesn't have any experience doing any kind of criminal work, but she throws herself in with misplaced loyalty, I might add. And she rushes off to this guy's assistance, but only to have her life circle down the drain. So that's the first book, Jessie's adventures and misadventures, trying to help her teacher, who's been accused of murder. The second book picks up, which is Hooker Avenue, and Jessie has become a pariah in the legal community. No one will hire her because of her past acquaintance with this killer. So she is setting off in the second book to try to reestablish herself. It's a book about basically the rehabilitation of her profession and her ethics. And she gets involved in a case which pits her against her former best friend, who's a detective. And the two of them are off on a search to find and locate 8 missing women who've disappeared throughout the Hudson Valley. And it turns out that these women are prostitutes and may or may not, they're cold cases, so their cases may or may not be connected. So we have Jessie moving into our third book, which is also The Empty Kayak. And she again is butting heads with her best friend. Now, the whole story really centers about the relationship of these two women. You have a woman who's a criminal defense attorney. You have a woman who's a detective. And you have one woman, obviously, who wants to put bad guys away and another who's trying to get them free. So you find these two childhood friends have really, over the years, become polarized because of their professional and personal lives. And that brings us up to The Empty Kayak.
That came through. Their relationship was just so. I felt for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it was so gripping because here you are, and to kind of set the scene for our readers or for our viewers here about the premise of The Empty Kayak. Jessie's estranged, or I guess they've kind of reconciled at this point. The father of her child, he goes missing while he is kayaking out on the Hudson, and Ebony is the detective who is assigned to the case. She has to go make this notification of missing and kind of this underlying presumed dead notification to Jessie. And you can just, the tension in this room was just like, oh my gosh, reading it. And it happens within like the opening pages. And you're just sucked into this like horrible event, but so invested in finding out for both women how this is going to play out. So I would love to know, Jodé, how did you decide to focus on the dueling points of view? And there's another POV in this with the new district attorney. So could you talk a little bit about the folks who are telling the story from their point of view?
Well, what I try to do when I tell my stories is I like to give the readers a 360-degree view of the legal system. So I believe that, first of all, you need to have a district attorney or someone who's in the administrative or the position of power. Then you also have to have a detective, the one who's actually investigating the crime and through whose eyes you view the actual legal and police procedure. Then there's always a victim. But in this case, in my other books, I've had Jessie be the attorney who's also kind of an amateur sleuth. And again, in this book, she's not so much an attorney, but much more of an amateur sleuth. And she's the one that has the most emotional tie to the victim, being that the presumed drowning was of the father of her child. So we have Ebony, who's not only investigating a crime, but she's also tugging because, first of all, it's Jessie's ex-partner and also a friend of hers. So she's got that double whammy. And then you have Jessie Jessie and this guy, Kyle, have split up, but he's still the father of her child. And even though both of them have emotionally moved on to other relationships, she's got to protect her child. She wants to find out, is the father of her child still alive? And if not, what happened? What is the cause of his death? Then we have Cindy Tirico. And in this book, I wanted to have a voice of reason. I wanted an older person to be telling their perspective, to come at the book and come at the investigation from a more mature perspective. Someone who's been around the block and has a little bit of baggage with her, so that you get to see it from an older person's point of view and someone who has a little bit more experience. But I wanted the perspective of an older woman to come in. And that's why I brought Cindy in. And Cindy has taken over the job from the guy that Jessie is now engaged to, a guy named Hal Samuels. So you have all of these characters who are interwoven together and knew, to some degree, everybody knew the victim, and everybody is shocked when they find out who the victim is, especially Ebony, because she gets called to the scene. Oh, there's a boating accident. And that's what the district attorney thinks. Oh, there's been a boating accident. And they go down, they find out all of a sudden it's a kayaking accident. And then the next step is we find out who the victim is, and boom, that sets the tension up for the rest of the book.
Well, and one of the things, excuse me, it's high allergy season in the Midwest, so just bear with me here.
Here too.
One of the things also that to add into the mix is we get right off the bat, Kyle, the deceased individual, he might be engaged to somebody new, to what appears to be a very powerful, well-respected family, but they also seem kind of shady a little bit at the same time. Could you talk about Kyle's new kind of apparent love interest in her family? Because I'll admit, I haven't gotten very far in, but these folks strike me. It's like, okay, these are well-heeled individuals. They have a lot of connections. So they're not your typical kind of stereotypical bad guys, if you know what I mean.
Yes, they're a pack. They really are a pack that once they realize that it potentially may be a crime, they circle around the wagon. They really draw in and they protect each other. It's a family that has the father who is he's like vice president of, he's in big pharma. You have the mother who's a well-renowned artist. You have a son who's in finance, another son who's in the sports betting industry. And then you have Olivia, and she is the presumed fiance who was out on the river with my victim, with Kyle at the time. And it's to me, I wanted to create a situation where you really don't know. I mean, in all mysteries, you want to find out. You have all these suspects. Who were the suspects? Who could possibly have committed a potential crime? And that was what's so interesting. And I don't know if I've mentioned this. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but this is all of my books, as I said, are inspired by true crimes that have occurred in Hudson Valley. And this one, in fact, was inspired by a crime that happened off an island in the Hudson River called Bannerman's Island, where a couple went out kayaking. There was an insurance policy, and the person who had the insurance policy on him disappeared. And there was the woman went to jail. She was charged with manslaughter. She was charged with second-degree murder. I mean, this was a case that if you Google it, it shows up in the UK Daily Mail, the New York Times.
Wow.
As far as the Sydney, Australia. I mean, it was a People magazine. There was a 2020 and Dateline story about this actual underlying story. So this crime is really a very compelling crime where you have two lovers who go out and really they get caught in a storm. So, was it an accident? Was it murder, or did Kyle commit suicide? So you have all of these things really being juggled throughout the book.
The crime, the true crime that you're talking about, I very much remember this on the news cycle. So seeing how you've taken something that happened in real life and turned it into as the inspiration for fiction. I would love to know, what was the thought process? Was it something that you saw this true crime in real life and was like, "Ooh, I should write a book about it"? Or was it something that like you had already been toying with, and thus when it was presented in real life, it was like, "Oh, like now I can kind of pull these elements in and work from there"?
Well, I was introduced to the true crime because the woman who was the murderer had lived with and been engaged to a friend of mine for a couple of years. So I had a personal connection to the crime, as I've had personal connections to the crimes in my prior two books. So I always try to have some kind of personal connection that really serves as an impetus for me to actually tell the story, and I think tell it with heart. So this book was particularly intriguing to me because I was looking at a crime that did not happen on the land. You have a totally different kind of crime scene. And I wanted to examine how you would actually go about finding out how a crime happened in the middle of the Hudson River. So to do that, I went and I had to speak to a forensic aquatic pathologist. I spoke to the fire department. I saw, how their emergency boats went out. I took a class on the estuary river, which is the Hudson River, and how the tides affect what happens and what the actual physical and geological structure of the Hudson is. All of those things helped me write this book. It was really, I guess this comes back to being an attorney. When you're an attorney, you do a lot of research before you present a case. And I believe as an attorney, you are a storyteller. You have to present your case to a judge, you have to present your case to a jury, and you really have to persuade your adversary that you have a valid case. To me, that was the impetus in storytelling. I took those skills and that hopefully ability, and I transferred it over to fiction. And again, drawing from my background, I was able to look around me and say, okay, I live in the Hudson Valley. I'm a female attorney. What are the stories that ring true to me? And The Empty Kayak was certainly one that rang very, very true to me, having that personal connection.
I think your experience and background is just so evident in the writing, because we're so drawn into not only the procedure, but just how folks in these situations are reacting. And as I was reading, I had no idea that in the case of like at least on the Hudson River, that the fire department is the one that has Marine 1 and Marine 2, which I love them popping up. And just like I was curious and knowing, that you live in the area, if those are the names of their boats in real life, and what a ridged hull inflatable rescue boat, like just that you had like so many different different vehicles that were being used, and all of these different all the different equipment. And so the research that you must have done was probably extremely fascinating. And so I would love to hear more about like what you uncovered and what you found to be like the most like, wow, like this is totally not what I thought it was before you started your research.
Well, before I talk a little bit about the boats, I figured my first step was going to talk to the divers. So I contacted the New York State Troopers and spoke with their senior dive team. And they were the ones that told me about what goes on when you go, when they're called upon. And they also hinted to me about the actual opaqueness of the Hudson. I mean, it's so opaque that when the divers go down there and they hold their hands in front of their faces, they can't even see them. So I thought, okay, that's one element. And then they referred me to, and they also were the ones that said, oh, we're the dive team that gets called in, but before we even get there, it's the fire department. It's a local fire department that has these two crafts, and they just bought that the new Zodiac that goes out. And yes, they are actually called Marine 1 and Marine 2. And then they're called before the sheriff's department comes out. So they get the local call. It takes them like 4 to 6 minutes to be able to go down to the Hudson, which I had no idea. I mean, they are obviously on standby. In 4 to 6 minutes, they're down there and they're in the water, and then they proceed out. Then I was also led to an aquatic forensics pathologist. And it turns out that a woman's name was Andrea Zaferis. And she's well regarded, known around the world. And she was actually involved in the true crime case. She was the pathologist on that case. So she told me a lot about what happened in their investigating the case, the need to reenact a case like this to see whether or not the whole case turned around a defect in the kayak. I don't want to mention exactly what it is. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but a lot of this hinges on a certain defect in the kayak. So the question is, did this defect contribute or cause this death and this drowning? So she had very clear opinions about that, which I thought was very interesting. Meanwhile, I also had to speak to kayakers, and I'm not a kayaker. So I figured that in order for me to understand what my characters were going through and to understand the importance of equipment, it was important for me to go out in a kayak on the Hudson. So my husband, my son, and I went out on kayaks in the Hudson, which was very treacherous, needless to say.
I mean, you're writing a book about a capsized kayak, and it's like, and I'm going to go out and reenact it in some ways. Like, that's very brave. That's very brave of you.
Yeah, especially when one of our viewers, DHB, chimes in that says kayaks are hazardous to good health. So
yes, they are.
Yeah. And we also want to take a minute, in addition to DHB, Farmhouse Reader and Paula are here joining us, and have checked in. So we appreciate all of that. So I guess one of the things that I was really curious about, Jodé, was you talk about the challenges of a crime that may or may not have been committed on the water, especially not in obviously a river is different than a lake because you've got the water moving in a river. I just find it really intriguing that anybody even thought in the book, that is, anybody even thought that this was anything other than just an awful accident. Because, I mean, it's like folks are out there, they're having a picnic, all of a sudden a storm blows up, there's this horrible accident, or something happens, and, to me, I'm reading, and I write this stuff, I'm thinking, but there's no evidence, or any evidence there may have been washed away, is long gone down river. So how did you deal with that?
Well, that's the beauty of fiction, and there were certain clues that I tried to, or certain breadcrumbs that I left along the way that hinted that it may or may not have been, an accident that was caused by an intervening, by Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And also remember, I'm able to look at, since I'm inspired by true crime, I'm able to look at what actually happened, because in this situation I was able to see that there were so many different factors. You had the weather, you had what these people were wearing at the time of the accident, the type of kayaks that they were using. You had, as you say, the tide. the Hudson is known as an estuary river, which means it's fed from the ocean, and it rises and it falls at certain times of the day. So you have that playing. You have geology and geography at play. So that was really the beauty of writing this story. I had just so many different avenues to pursue in creating this tale.
I think, and if we haven't already enticed our viewers enough, the title itself, The Empty Kayak, is just so like ominous and foreboding, and it's like, wow, you're in for. We talk about the storm that like picks up as Kyle is out on the Hudson, and it's like you're just in for a wild ride. So I again like wonderful, gripping mystery. Not to mention the fact that it's like a missing persons case to kind of really start things out, and the challenges between writing a missing persons case versus writing, you know, a straight out like here's your dead body and moving forward. So again, for our readers who are, you know, looking for a tantalizing mystery, The Empty Kayak is available now.
Yes.
Jodé, I want to be cognizant of the time. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I would really love to talk about your new offering, the Writers Law School. We have a lot of our viewers who are also writers themselves, and I would just like to just take a moment and have you just share what this program is about, in case there are folks that are out there looking for advice, and this might be exactly what they need.
Well, you know, as I was going to conferences, people would come to me and they say, "Oh, Jodé, I know you're an attorney. Can I ask you this question?" So I said, "You know, this is what's really needed." So it was during the pandemic, I came up with an idea that it would be a really basic 101 introduction to writers for the law. And I try to make it fun. It's like a 45-minute presentation and I cover everything from copyrights, patents, trademarks, public domain, fair use, how to start a business or the type of business entity that will be best for a writer. And then I go through a program. A little bit of the program is dedicated to the do's and don'ts for publishing contracts. So it's really, I try to do it in an entertaining way with slides, with some cartoons. And then I also, at the end of the program, offer a handout which has all of my resources that I've used to create the program. And I've been very fortunate. I've given this at Sisters in Crime, Romance Writers of America, libraries across the country, Fort Worth, Texas, San Diego, I've given it. And mostly it's done virtually. I've done a few of them in person. And if people are interested, they can go to my website, jodémillman.com, and there's a tab that has the Writers Law School. I have some blogs on there which are certain areas, which are blogs that I've written about areas that I think are of most interest to writers. And I constantly update that. And I'll also have a listing of the events and where I'm going to be presenting this. A lot of the times it's free through libraries. So people keep checking back with my website, they'll be able to see where I'm giving this program. And it's really, I mean, I really felt that it was a very worthwhile program. And if any writer who's out there, a couple tips I can give you, first of all, is join the Authors Guild. Because first of all, they will review a contract for you for free. They will set up a website for you for free. They always have seminars, they have programs, they have listings of grants that are available for writers. It's a really worthwhile organization. Plus, they're an advocate for all writers in Congress and, you know, before the legislatures. Another tip would be that if people immediately have a legal problem, the Writers Guild also has attorneys on staff to help them. Also, I'm working with the Writers Guild. We're going to be doing hopefully a free clinic for writers, and I can let people know when that's going to happen. And also another great organization, Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. They provide free legal services to writers and artists, photographers. So those are the places that if people have immediate needs, they can go and they can check them. But as I said, my program, you can check online, and hope that answers your question.
No, my ears were perking up as you're saying kind of all the things that the Writers Law School covers, because, you know, especially if you are just getting started out in the business and you're kind of navigating like, okay, like maybe I'm going to go the route of independently publishing and, forming my own LLC, like all of this stuff that's out there. That's just sounds like a really, really great tool for folks to utilize. So at your website, jodymillman.com, they can learn
You
more.
got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jody, the Empty Kayak is brand new. It's all of a day old.
Yes, it is.
But since time is running short, we got to ask, what's next?
Next.
Well, I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, I have been writing constantly for like the past, I would have to say 2 years. I'm taking a break for the summer, have
Good
some
for
ideas
you.
percolating in my head, and then in the fall I'll sit down and I think I'm going to do a standalone though. I think I'm going to give these people my characters a little bit of a vacation and maybe try something else. I think we all know that. You've done series, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to let them maybe ride off into the sunset for a little while, or just like have a little bit of peace of mind for a time. Can we look forward to more of the Queen City crime mysteries, or is this is the Empty Kayak kind of the finale of that?
Oh, no. It's not the finale. It's
Okay.
just going on hiatus, as we would say.
Perfect. So,
Yeah.
so we can expect more. Excellent.
Yeah, and I know my next book will also be inspired by a local crime, and I do have one in my mind for that as well.
Excellent. So kind of along that, I mean, you give so much to the community, the writing community. These are fabulously intriguing stories. For folks who are new to you, where can they find you online, in person? Do you have any appearances, promoting the book coming up? Tell us about some of that stuff too.
Okay, well, first of all, I will be doing my big book launch is at Oblong Books in Rhinebeck, New York. That's on June 27th. I will also be at Thriller Fest this weekend. And I will also, if anybody knows what the Walkway Over the Hudson is, I'm doing a Walkway Talks on June 16th. And people can, the best way to find me is you can go to my website, my brand new spanking website, www.jodé, Jode Millman, Millman.com. I'm on Facebook, Jodé Millman, Instagram, Jody Writes. I'm not on Twitter as much. Goodreads and Amazon, please. And if you read my books and you like them, please leave me a review. As writers, we can all use a little bit of a good review.
Indeed. Yes.
I very much agree with that. And Jody, thank you so much for choosing to spend a moment with us here today.
Yes.
At Bookish Time. And it was a delight to speak with you and to find out more about the Empty Kayak, about Jesse, about Ebony, and the world that you have created within the Hudson and all of those amazing crimes. I can only imagine that it must be really, really fun. Fun maybe be subjective, but it must be really entertaining to just kind of view everything that's happening around you and turning it into something as twisting and mysterious as what you've created in this series.
It's fun. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me here, JC and Sarah.
Thank you. And for those of you who joined us live here today on A Bookish Moment, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thanks, folks.
You can definitely check out Jody's work. We have her website is in our show notes. So make sure you visit her website, give her a follow so that you can stay in touch and hear about everything that she has going on and find out what is next on your docket. So again, thank you, Jody, for being here. And for folks, we will see you back here for an episode of The Bookish Hour next Thursday, June 8th. We're going to be joined by Lori Lewis-Ham. And until then, everybody stay bookish. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.